wanted to see something that was trustworthy, verifiable, and non-hackable. And then if there was a close race, we wanted to make sure we could, have a paper trail and a chain of custody. Can you comment on that to make sure that everybody knows how that works?
Sure. So it is still a paper ballot, and there is a complete chain of custody. So good thing to point out that wasn't in the earlier presentation, that across those 11 days, at the end of each day, the ballots are sealed up and they're brought back. They're securely brought back to and secured in Norwalk, so ballots are not left overnight anywhere throughout the county. So there is a complete chain of custody. There's a log, and there are seals that are verified, so we know the number of ballots that left a location matches the number of ballots that came back to us at the department. So there is an audit trail and a chain of custody for that. The paper ballots are what get counted, and those are counted on an independent tally system. No vote cast data is maintained on these devices at all. They're just marking devices. Under California state law, we're required to do a post-election audit of 1% of the voting precincts that are selected at random. So we don't know which precincts those are going to be until after the election, and those are selected, and then we do a manual count, and that manual count will be based on the paper ballots, both the vote-by-mail ballots and the ballots that are produced from the device.
And how close do those two have to be?
The manual count, you're looking for 100% match, and anything that's different from that has to be documented and has to be explained. So, previously with the InkaVote system, it could be that the voter had not inserted the ballot all the way into the vote recorder, so the dots were between numbers or something like that. So that would sometimes be a reason in the manual count. That is less likely to happen here because you're not inking them. Same thing with the vote-by-mail ballots, where people are still using writing instruments to do that. People do interesting things with paper and pencil. Sometimes they, so this is what the vote-by-mail ballot looks like. Sometimes voters will circle the entire name here, but not fill in the circle. But when you manually look at it, it's pretty clear that their intent was to vote for the person that they circled. So in a manual count, you would note that. Yeah.
Can you explain to us what a risk limiting audit is, and explain why I'm assuming you're choosing not to go down that path of having a risk limiting audit?
Well, I guess I would start by saying I'm not sure why you're assuming that.
Okay.
So
fair enough. I'm assuming it because Philip Stark apparently says that that's not possible with this current system. So are you in fact using a risk limiting audit?
Well, we are not, because California law does not. California law has a pilot project to allow for risk limiting audits for, I think it goes through the end of, I can't remember if it's the end of 2019 or 2020.
And can you explain what that is?
A risk limiting audit, and I'm not an expert at this, so I'll just be very clear on that. A risk limiting audit is a form of post-election auditing that is based on a mathematical equation that statistically verifies the outcome in the election is correct. And so depending on the margin of victory in the race, the number of ballots that have to be looked at manually grows or gets smaller based on that margin. So if you get a really close contest, you have to look at more ballots in the audit to get enough of a statistical sample to validate that the outcome of that was an accurate outcome. And in the risk limiting models that I have seen, and this goes back to the prior question, if you're not getting a 100% match, then you keep adding additional ballots until you reach that statistical level that validates the
yeah, thank you. This seems like a fantastic improvement over the InkaVote. So I have a couple of questions. One, the sign-in process, since it's not done at a local level, are people going to need IDs? How are they signing in? And then my other question is poll workers. How are you managing? Is it all volunteer or is it paid since it's a long?
Sure.
So I'm curious about that part.
Sure. So California does not require voter identification to vote.
Right.
That's a clear policy in state law. There's one circumstance, it's a very narrow circumstance where a voter would have to show ID. That's if they registered to vote through the mail and they didn't provide a California DMV number that could be validated. Then the first time they show up to vote, they're asked for ID, but never after that. And that's usually a very small number of voters. So voters will be signing, they'll be signing the same oath that they signed in the paper roster, but they'll be signing it on a tablet, and it will attest that they are who they say they are, that they haven't voted another ballot in the same election, and that they're eligible to vote in the election. What the electronic poll book allows us to do is update that on a real-time basis. So there's some real benefits to that. One is the one I already talked about, is that you can vote anywhere and get your local ballot. Two is that if you think you can be sneaky and vote in Santa Monica and then slip down here to Culver City to another vote center and vote again, no, we will already know that you voted, so you will not be able to jump around to other voting locations. And three, from a campaign perspective, and this particular audience, this may be the most compelling benefit, is that where you used to have to send out your workers to go look at those lists to cross off the people who have voted, we will now update that on a real-time basis and make that available through our website. So you will know each day who has voted. And we do that with the vote-by-mail ballots as well. So you'll be able to, for your get-out-the-vote efforts, you'll be able to target those activities much more specifically. On the poll worker issue, you're right, with 11 days of voting, it's a different model. The lead worker at each of these vote centers is most likely going to be either a county employee or a county temporary employee, so more traditional employee relationship. And then that will be augmented by community workers, student workers that follow more the model of the traditional poll workers. So we'll be recruiting them. We know that most of those people are not going to be available to vote or to work for 6-7 days. So we've blocked it out so they can work 2-day segments, 4-day segments, or something of that manner. There's a number of different positions within the vote center. We have the check-in clerks. We're going to have line monitors to help, especially with this first time out, to help orient people when they come in to vote. We'll also have workers that are out with the voting devices to help people get oriented with those as well. So, so we will still be using community workers, but they'll be augmented by county employees. We're very fortunate that LA County, the Board of Supervisors, by ordinance, has authorized all county employees to be available to work during the election period. Obviously, not all can, because there are other county services that still have to continue, but we are able to draw from employees from other departments. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm just curious. Now, the thing I love about this is you can register on the same day at the vote center, correct?
Correct.
So when you register, it goes to Sacramento, correct?
Right, so when you register to vote, we will enter you into the database.
But how does the database connect?
Let me walk you through it and then I'll
Sure.
answer that. So when you register, we'll put you into the system, and that's what will tell us which ballot to give you. So we'll know based on your address which ballot to give you. You'll go vote. The difference with if you are a same-day voter registration, you will have to bring that ballot back to the table and put it in an envelope, similar to the old provisional ballots. And that will be held in that envelope until we send the data up to the state and get it verified. Once it's verified, then we can open that envelope and count that ballot. So it is a regular ballot in the sense that you just registered to vote, but we do have to get validation from the state on your data, and that's not going to happen in real-time basis. That usually takes, depending on how good your data is that you gave us, that can be done in 24 hours or sometimes it takes longer than that.
So it's not instantaneous.
It's not instantaneous.
But if you
Hopefully
have
at
11
some point
days.
It will be in the future. It will be, but it's not now.
Right. So, but then when you send it, how do you send it? Do you send it via internet?
Through a secured, it is
Is it
it is
a
through a network, but
LAN
it's
or
not open.
WAN?
Pardon?
A LAN or a WAN? Wide area network or a local area network?
It's a secured network. I don't know which of those it is.
It's gonna be an HTTPS.
Yeah,
What'd you say?
HTTPS. That's internet.
but it's
Well,
this, well, what I will say is
with
that
land or WAN.
what I will say is that
That's a
it's no
security
different
protocol.
than when we enter new voter registrations in our headquarters. It's the same process. It goes up through the same pipe that we use at the
Okay.
headquarters. And the e-poll books, and I should mention this because I'm sure some people are interested in that. Want to be really, this is important for you to know, the e-poll books are on a secure network because we have to have that real-time update to know that you voted and to be able to suspend the vote by mail ballots and to add new registrations. So they are on a secure network. We have multiple layers of security that are monitoring those networks throughout. The ballot marking devices are not networked. Those are each individual devices. They're not connected to each other. They're not connected to any network.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
We have a climate crisis and people are aging. Do you expect more people to be driving to vote under this plan?
I don't have any data to show that.
Is it a longer distance? Average longer distance?
Let me know when you're ready. Okay. I don't have any data to show that. What I know from other counties that have done this is that spreading the voting over 11 days, that the idea, the philosophy behind this is that people will be voting when they're already in proximity to those vote centers. So they're voting near their place of work, they're voting near where they drop their kids off at school, where they go to work out at the gym after work, or where they're shopping over the weekend. So I don't think that this model itself independently increases traffic. And we also are required to have these vote centers located near public transit lines and in places where people are already congregating. Yes.
Are we going to be receiving the sample ballots by mail, the paper ballots by mail in addition to this?
Can you repeat the
Also,
question?
Sure.
Are we going to be receiving the standard paper sample ballots that we received by mail? Will we still be receiving those? And he said yes.
Yes. And they will, just to add on to that a little bit, because that's usually what notifies you of your polling place too. So obviously there are 1,000 vote centers, but we will be putting on the sample ballot the closest vote center to where you're registered, both the closest 11-day vote center and the closest 4-day vote center. So we will be giving you information about the vote centers that are closest to where you are, as well as telling you where you can get the full list of the 1,000 votes.
And my second question was, are you going to have an online tutorial that's more expensive than the one that you
Yes.
researched?
Let's go to this side.
Hi, I have 3 questions. So, just to confirm
Could you speak up a little?
yeah,
Okay.
hi.
Second mic.
You can, drop your, paper ballot.
No, how about I'll repeat the question.
So,
If I remember to do that.
So, if you have a mail-in ballot, you can drop this at one of the polling centers, is that correct?
Yes, so the question is, can you drop off a voted vote by mail ballot at a vote center? Absolutely you can, and I'm glad you asked that because that's another component of this new model, is that in addition to being able to drop that vote by mail ballot off at a vote center, we will also be locating 200 drop boxes throughout the county where you can drop off vote by mail ballots, because that was, again, part of our feedback was that we heard a lot of voters like to receive the ballot by mail, but they want to put it in a ballot box. They don't want to send it back through the mail.
I have 2 more questions.
Sure.
What are the hours of these, voting centers?
So the law requires that during that 11-day voting period that they're open a minimum of 8 hours, and then on election day, they're open the traditional 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Right now, we believe most of them, we will use standard business hours, so they will probably be 8 to 5, but there will be some locations based on the area served. We know we want to have some places that are open later hours into the evening for people who are commuters, and then on the weekends we may look at extending hours, but we are required to have them open for a minimum of 8 hours.
Okay, and lastly, if you were saying that if there's like 3 choices that you were to make on a particular
Contest?
on the ballot, and you only make say 2 out of the 3, it's going to say to you when you the ballot device is going to say when you go to check that you are happy with your choices, that you've only chosen 2 and not the 3? Is it going to insist that you make a third choice?
No.
Or
So the question is on the vote for multiple contests. To use your example, if it's a vote for 3 contests and you get to the review screen and you had only marked 1, it's going to prompt you and say you have 2 choices remaining. You make that choice as the voter. You don't have to vote for 3. It's just going to let you know that. And then when it prints out, and I can show you an example, you'll also see that on your printed ballot that it will say no selections and then the selections that you made. So you'll actually see that on your physical ballot as well.
Hi. So when I was reading about these systems,
Ellen, speak up, please.
well, when I was reading about these systems, I read from in one place that the way this actually works is that there's a barcode on the ballot, and the barcode is actually what's counted. The barcode encodes how people have voted, and that's what's counted. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. I'll show you and I'll explain it to you. I think that I think it's important to understand how that works, right? So
Yeah, because a barcode is not human readable.
It's a QR code.
Something like a barcode.
which is like a barcode. But so this is what the voted ballot looks like. I know it's hard to see. Actually, I have a bigger one.
Here's the ballot. I just need to go.
That was gonna answer.
Really up in the left-hand corner.
So this is a ballot. This is what it looks like. This is the human readable text, and it's pretty big font. You'll see when you get there. You're right. It does create this QR code. This QR code includes all the data that's on here. So this is a summary of what's here. When it comes back to our office and we run it through the scanners for tallying, you are correct. This is what's being read because that's what allows for high-speed counting.
But
Now,
for purposes of the audit,
for purpose of the audit, you got ahead of me, when we do the 1% post-election audit, we're counting the human readable text. When we do recounts, we're counting the human readable text. And also, there are 2 ways that you can verify this. One is you can, and you'll see this when you use the device, when you get to the end of your voting experience, you can, when you put your voted ballot back into the device, you can ask it to read it back to you. And you can do that if you prefer. You can even take it to another device and have it do that, so that it's reading it back to you, both on the screen and you can listen to it audibly. Also, there are codes next to yours. I know it's hard to see from here, but I can show you later. There are codes next to the names, and if you read this QR code with a generic QR code reader that any of us can get on our devices, it's going to give you these codes, and you can self-audit those back to the human readable text. And we have a whole paper that explains that, and we will publish those codes prior to each election. I want to just, before I finish, I just want to contrast that to, this is what your ballot looked like before. So from a verification standpoint, this is far more.
But it's not actually a hand-marked paper ballot.
No.
It's a machine-marked paper ballot, not a hand-marked.
It's a voter-marked paper ballot. I agree with you. That's correct. It's a voter-marked paper ballot that can be verified. And the same thing is true. The same thing is true. Just to be clear, on your vote by mail ballot. Just to be clear, on your vote by mail ballot, when you use a vote by mail ballot and you fill in these circles, what the tally system is seeing is a bunch of circles, which is exactly what's in that QR code. So it's no different with the hand-marked paper ballots. What the tally system is seeing is a series of circles. It's not reading this human readable text. It's reading the filled-in oval. So it's really no different. Yes, sir.
Can you tell us how do you think this new system will affect the announcement of the results? There's always that period of time after the polls close.
Can you tell that he's a candidate?
That's all I'm interested in. The longest hour from 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock.
Yeah, exactly.
If you could tell us that. And also, if you don't mind, over the 11 days that you're going to be gathering these ballots, will you be counting them in advance?
No, those are great questions. I don't know why that's doing that. So, let me start with the second question. No, we do not count any ballots until after the polls have closed on election day. So we're collecting the ballots across those 11 days, just like we're getting vote-by-mail ballots in during that time. But we don't count and produce results. We legally cannot do that until after the polls close at 8 o'clock. The first question is somewhat tricky, so let me try to explain it this way. So it's not going to speed up the count in the sense that we will still be counting throughout the night, and we will still be counting throughout the 28-day post-election canvass period. That's not going to change because the laws in California still allow us to receive vote-by-mail ballots after the election. We'll still need to process the conditional voter registration ballots and all that. I think what will be different is that when we release results starting shortly after 8 o'clock on election night, they will be more representative of the entire county, where before it was more the precincts that came in first were the precincts closest to Norwalk, and if you were out on the north part of the county or the far west part of the county, you were waiting till way later in the evening before you started to get any indication of what was happening in your contest. By having the vote center ballots come in and the fact that people can vote anywhere, those early results will be more representative of the entire electorate, if that makes sense.
Thanks.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I have a real issue with the poll pass. You're talking about basically it's going to be generating a QR code on someone's individual mobile device, and I can just see that being easily hackable. Any foreign actor or any malicious actor could just scan your device, scan for who has this file on their device, and change any number of votes. And then by the time that, it's going to generate a QR code that's not really going to be accurate, and then that's what they're uploading to the system when they go in to vote.
Well, that's why when they go in to vote, if they choose to use that.
That's if they choose to, but you and I know that a lot of people, if they've taken the time to figure out, to go through their device and go, okay, it's done, I just go here. And then that's it.
No, because your ballot's printed
Yeah,
out. You have to look over your
I
ballot
don't
before
think,
you put it back
I
in.
think that anybody who does that is going to look very closely at the review screen, and the device is going to prompt them to do that.
Do you know millennials?
No need to throw millennials under the bus. I thought it's a code. Are you getting the QR on your phone, or are you getting a code to put in?
It is a QR that is then read.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like a boarding pass.
Yeah, it's very much operates the way that like a mobile boarding pass. But again, what I want to emphasize is that's not the ballot. You can't just submit that. You have to go. You have to check in. You have to go to the device, and you're going to have to look at the screen and go through the steps before you print your ballot and cast your ballot.
You have to. You
Yeah.
have to do it.
So you can review it.
Absolutely.
You'll have to review it and then submit it.
It prompts you
Okay.
to review it on the screen, and it prompts you to review it on the printed copy before you turn it.
All right.
I actually have a sample of it, so when we're testing it out, I can show you what it looks like.
Yes, sir.
Dean, I'm pretty engaged in the political world, but sometimes I like to take a break from it, so I listen to sports talk radio. And 3-4 weeks ago, I turned on, and the loudmouths were talking, and they were talking LeBron, and they were talking Kawhi, but they were also talking about you, Dean Logan.
That was at the mock election.
Yeah, so I wanted to applaud you for that. It obviously was you guys who made that happen, and that's a good creative way to try. People in this room are politically engaged. A lot of people out there aren't. So I applaud you to continue thinking beyond the box like that. I guess my question is about what I think is one of the worst features of our contemporary democracy, which is turnout, especially compared to many other countries. Even in the sexy presidential election, we get 55 or 60%. So do you think that this new system and or other things that you were doing is going to do a good job of trying to combat that enduring challenge of just getting people to show up and do it?
No, thank you for that question. I think it's a great question, and a couple different things I'll say on that. First, I think there's pretty good data to show that the mechanics of how elections are run, so that like the time, date, and location of elections themselves are pretty low on what influences voter participation. I mean, if people are motivated to vote, there's pretty good data to show that they'll overcome time, place, and equipment to vote. And that's where we know we have the hardcore voters. Most of you are hardcore voters that, you might get mad at me, some of you already might be mad at me about this system, but you're gonna vote, right? You're not gonna so I don't think it's gonna change that. What motivates people to vote usually are the issues or the candidates, and we can't impact that. That said, I think there are two places where this does have an impact. One is the expansion of the days and locations for voting. We know that there are 5 counties in California that moved to this model in 2018. All 5 of those counties had higher voter turnout than the statewide average. So there's data to show that. We also believe that that for the underrepresented communities that have been traditionally lower in turnout, that expanding these options, offering the accessibility features and the language features, if we get the word out, that we will see increased participation amongst those subcategories of voters, and that the demographics of the voters who do vote will be more representative of the demographics of the county as a whole.
Just a quick follow-up, if I may. Thank you, excellent, but I think you left out one key thing, which is the same-day registration.
Right.
I talk to low-information citizens and a lot, I don't know, maybe I'm registered, I'm not sure. But, so I guess I'm encouraging you, the more you can hammer that out in your publicity, you can, if you don't know if you're registered, just show up.
Yeah, and
during those 11 days, and you can vote.
There's certainly anecdotal evidence of that too. The California law that allows for same-day registration actually went into effect in 2018, but was limited to the office of the registrar. So I can tell you on election day in Norwalk in November of 2018, we had people lined up around, and this is true in every county in the state. We had people lined up around our building, and they were still voting even after 8 o'clock because that was the only place you could register to vote and vote on the same day. So I think you're right. Adding that over the 11-day voting period and at all of the locations, I think will have an impact.
And you publicizing it.
Yes.
Thank you.
In the back.
Well, there's a letter that's distributed from this guy, Philip Stark, who's Associate Dean of Math and Sciences at Berkeley, in which he raises many questions about the trustworthiness of the ballot marking device system, and goes in so far as to say that, virtually every expert on our board and advisory board recommended against purchasing universal use BMDs. And I mean, there are obvious, intuitive questions to the user about, this little squiggly thing in the corner and how we know that that's actually being translated properly into votes, and how do we know that the ballot that we get a copy of is the same as the one that's going in the machine. So I guess I just want to ask you, by whom, well, I guess it's a multiple question. Who has used this system? What other jurisdictions have used this system and audited its trustworthiness? What is your office's criteria for determining its trustworthiness? And I take it you have a degree in public administration with no particular math or science background. To whom do you delegate? Well, no offense, but that's what it is. To whom do you delegate? Well, to whom do you delegate the, scientific assessment of, this operation's trustworthiness?
First of all, I don't delegate it to anyone. There are state laws and federal regulations that govern that. And as I said at the beginning of the presentation, California has probably the highest voting system standards in the country, and this system has to be certified by the Secretary of State through a third-party independent testing authority before it can be used in California.
And who is that third-party testing authority?
There's a company called Freeman Craft & McGregor that was selected by the Secretary of State through a competitive procurement bid. That's independent of my office, as it should be, because I shouldn't be self-certifying our system. So it has to meet the certification requirements. It has to be certified for use in California. It will meet those requirements, otherwise we won't be able to use it. It's also validated through the post-election audit that I talked about earlier. California is one of the few states that has a mandatory post-election
But this is
audit.
first use, who has used it and audited it elsewhere?
Nobody has used this system. This system was built by and for LA County. It's a publicly owned system. It's not owned by a corporation or run by a corporation. It belongs to all of us as citizens of Los Angeles County, and then it's been tested and will be certified by the Secretary of State under those standards. Now, it did go through a mock election. It goes through logic and accuracy testing prior to. And I want to correct one thing that you said in terms of saying you don't know whether the ballot that goes in is the ballot that is counted. Again, please remember, this device does not count the vote. The paper ballot is what gets counted. This is not what's tallying the vote. That's on a separate system that also went through testing and certification by the Secretary of State, and that you can come and watch on election night when we're
But the paper ballot that is counted is not the paper ballot that the voter receives, correct?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Absolutely is. Absolutely is.
You're getting a copy of what they are getting.
You're getting a copy.
No. The voter is not walking out with this. This is the ballot. Just like this was your ballot on the old system, this is your ballot.
Paper ballot was your ballot.
It's a paper ballot. This is the only record of your votes. And it's coming back and being counted.
Is a QR code?
Everything you've mentioned is that this computer system is working at optimum. Some of us know that systems crash. What the hell are we going to do if the system crashes? Are we going to have, do we have a parallel system that they're both working, and if one goes out, you still have one or something? What do you do in that case?
So I think, again, it's multiple systems, and it's not indifferent than the prior model. If a device wasn't working at a polling place, then you shut down that device and you bring in additional devices. So part of what's great about the 11-day voting period is in the current environment, you have one day. If something happens, you're out. I mean, if you have to shut down the polling place, or those voters have to go somewhere else. Over an 11-day voting period, we have better options for recovery. We have machines that we can bring out to replace these. We can shut them down if needed. We have backup copies of the e-poll book data, so if the e-poll books go down, we can still issue ballots. The tally system has full redundancy and backup, just like the current tally system. So we're very cognizant of that. I mean, you can't run a system in LA County without some backups. Now, but I'm also going to be perfectly frank, just like in any emergency situation where things goes down, it's not going to be the optimum system that you have when everything's up. But of course there has to be backup plans.
The old ballot system, if I remember correctly, unless it was provisional, was anonymous. Is this new ballot also anonymous, or are there markers on that identify a particular whose vote?
No, great question. No, it's absolutely anonymous. So you sign in on the e-poll book and they issue you the ballot, but this device and this ballot doesn't have any information about you as the voter. All this knows is which ballot style to give you. So again, if it's Culver City, to give you the combination of contests for Culver City. Once it goes into the ballot box in the back, we have no way of tracking this back to any individual voter. This is just a valid voted ballot.
And even that QR, if I've done it from a sample ballot, has no identification on it.
Correct. Correct.
I was one of those poll workers, and at the end of the night,
Thank you for that.
we opened it and counted the number of ballots to match to the signatures, to the number of signatures. How is this going to work with these vote centers, and is it going to be done every day, or is it going to be done once in the 11 days? Is it?
No, it will be done each night at the end of the voting period. The ballot boxes that are on the back of each device will be unsealed. They'll remove the ballots. They'll do just like what you're used to. They'll do a full count of those ballots, seal them into a container with a certificate of their count. They'll seal that. On that certificate, it'll give the seal number that's used to seal that container, so that when it comes back to our office, when we unseal it, we can verify that the seal number is correct, that it hasn't been tampered with, and then we can record the number of ballots that was on the transmittal document, and we can audit that as we go along.
So when you're signing in on this pad, or are you going to be able, if you're at the vote center, are they going to know how many people came into their vote centers and
Yes.
make sure they match?
Yes, there's a full report of that. Yes.
First of all, I have a couple of questions or comments. First of all, Smartmatic is the company that you worked with to design this system, correct?
Not to design the system, no. Smartmatic, so the county worked with IDEO and our stakeholder community to design the system. We developed the specifications for the system, And then we did a public procurement, which is required by law, to seek a manufacturer to build our system. Smartmatic USA won that bid through a competitive public procurement to build to our specifications. So we own the intellectual property, we own the designs, they're building it to those designs for us. We didn't purchase their voting equipment, we're paying them to build our voting.
Okay, so who did you contract with for the e-poll book software, which I assume it's just software?
The e-poll book is through a vendor called No Ink. It's called PollPad, that's the product. It's a commercial off-the-shelf e-poll book system, and it's certified in the state of California for use in California. It's certified by the Secretary of State.
I guess I'll see this thing. I don't understand how this QR code works because it's unreadable by humans.
No, it's not, but
well, I don't, it does seem to be. I mean,
okay.
We don't know what's in it unless there's some thing, manual that we're gonna have with us or something. It's.
Which was the same thing when you had this. Is you in order to verify this, you'd have to go back to the manual to see that number 34 was Sally Smith and number 38 was Laura Herrera. You wouldn't.
But there's really no other.
Sure, it's the same thing.
You could have missed the whole.
It's the same thing here. It's Russell Rivera is 3K.
No.
If I read this QR code.
That's not what's in the we have no idea what's in the QR code.
No.
But you can read it and it'll tell you 3K.
Okay, well, maybe you can show me how to read the QR code, because I don't know how to read QR code.
No, but you can read this.
Yeah, but that's not.
We don't know for sure that
It's like
it's transferred the same.
Yeah, it's not the
But
same
you
thing.
didn't know that this transferred.
That's not an issue, though.
The ink vote, you mark it yourself.
That's right.
And the QR code, you are not marking it yourself. It is not a hand mark.
It's not a hand mark, but you are marking it yourself.
And it could have
you're
a second
reading it before you
decision.
submit it.
The machine
No,
is
but they're
marking
two
it.
different things.
I just said that.
They're absolutely two different things.
And if you don't feel comfortable
Boolean.
with that, you don't have to vote on it.
Then what can I vote on?
You can vote on a vote by mail.
You continue to vote by mail.
I have
Well,
a,
that's a nice FU.
Well, how's that, with all due respect, how's that an FU? That means that you as a voter now have the option to have us personally mail you a ballot in every election that you can mark. You can return it in multiple different ways, multiple locations, or over 11 days, you can come and vote at any location throughout the county. I don't think that's an FU. I think that's actually a pretty broad expansion.
Well, it doesn't
of voter
actually
access.
answer the question of the various points of software, all of which can be hackable. I was looking to find this.
All of which have been certified independently.
Yada, yada, you know.
Well,
Okay.
it's state law. I don't make the state
Alex
law.
Padilla
My
is
job
not
is, I have an
Look,
obligation to
here is
administer
hand-marked
elections
paper ballot.
for 5.4 million registered voters in 13 languages across a lot of square miles.
Okay, here is a simple version. Voter, paper ballot, ballot box, tabulation table. Here's what we got going on now. Voter, touchscreen, software, hackable, possibly. Device storage, software, hackable. Printer, software, hackable. Receipt, who knows what it is. QR code, who knows what it is. Then scanner,
Well, a lot of people know
software,
what all of those things
hackable,
are.
tabulator, software. So we got 1, 2,
Tabulator.
3, 4, 5 objects with, software.
Well, with all due respect,
hackable and
the FU's coming my way. If you don't like that, that's state law. If you want to change the state law to say we shouldn't have voting systems that use computers, that's a state law issue, and that's a state voting system standard. I don't make those decisions.
whatever.
I think what she's saying is, for instance, a QR code can tell you what you voted from the the ballot marking device. It can tell you what you voted, okay?
Yes, again.
Right, and then you put it in the box and it goes to, not Downey, to Norwalk. Now, the reader
will be down.
could be programmed differently to ignore what you voted and then put in a different vote, because it's Boolean, in programming language, you have Boolean decision making. So if read by tabulation, then vote this way. And then, so that's what the fear is. I mean, look at Kemp, look at Brian Kemp, look at, you know, all the people that cheated, like Kenneth Blackwell. There's a lot of distrust in the voting systems, especially by
Understood,
computer.
and I respect that. I think in both those cases, where they manipulated or allegedly manipulated the process was through limiting voter registration and limiting access to voting, which we're expanding.
Well, in Ohio, they went to a church that hacked the vote for Bush.
But to your point, that is the reason that the state law requires us to run a test prior to each election. We do that publicly. That's publicly noticed. It's also why the state law requires us to do a post-election audit. So
Of
there-
1%.
At your own selection.
No, it's not at our own selection.
It has been.
No, it has not.
Oh, yes, it is.
No, it has not. That is absolutely not true.
How do you
Dr. Judy Alter, who I think many of you know, comes every election, the day after the election, and makes a big deal out of that she's making the selection. So that's deceiving, and that's the kind of voter misinformation that is going to drive people away from voting in this election.
Well, when I participated before Judy, it wasn't our choice.
Well, it hasn't been for the last 13 years, I can tell you. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry I got here late. Is the software that's being run is from one company, the company that you've licensed from. The hardware was built to your spec and your design.
So was the software.
So was the software. Which then gets me to this question. How much, if any, of this is open sourced and available for anybody in here who knows how to read code to read code?
Yeah, so the software was built on, and we required it to be built on open source stack. I want to be careful how I use these terms because people have different definitions for these terms. So it's built on open source stack. It's publicly owned. It belongs to LA County. It has been and still is our intent for this to be a fully open source voting system. Right now in California, there's no governance for open source, for sharing the software that's used in voting systems. We have a working group that we initiated to try and address that. And as soon as there are guidelines and governance for that, we will publish the code and make it available. It is publicly owned code, and so it's not proprietary.
Okay, that's so at some point we've got access to that.
Correct.
Whether you guys get it to the point legally where it's available straight up, or somebody else wants to sue to get in there, and I'm not in that mood. And one other, that I was going to come back and ask because you said it was built on an open source stack, which can often mean that you've got a lot of open source libraries, and then the final execution is the final set of code is the proprietary part that they're kind of keeping off to the side. That's not what you've got. You've got it wholly owned.
None of it's proprietary. It's all publicly owned.
Okay.
Required in our contract.
Okay.
And it was all, I should also add, all developed, built, and installed in the United States.
Nice. Okay. Okay.
Okay, you may also mention something about these drop-off spots for the vote by mail ballot. Tell me about those.
Those are either, there's two models of drop-off boxes. One is like a staff box, so like inside a city clerk's office, a secured ballot box where people can drop it into a ballot box. And then we will also have bolted-in ballot boxes similar to like a U.S. postal box or a book drop-off box that's outside of libraries. It will be a secure box that you can drop your box in, or ballot in.
Can you drop them at the vote centers?
Yes, every vote center.
And put them in the regular post office box if you
Correct. And there's no postage required anymore.
All right. Thank you.
So we do want to allow for time for people to interact with the ballot marking device. So we can maybe have one or two more questions, and then I'm available to answer questions as well as our outreach staff and team as well.
Can I ask you, when do you anticipate having a list of all of the polling places, the voting centers, or whatever you call them?
we're securing those right now and getting agreements. Our goal is to have the full list of agreements by December 31st.
December 31st?
Yeah.
And if that box has 150 things, but it said that only 100 voted, what happens to that? I mean, in other words, what if it's been stopped 50 before you even started?
Yeah, so that would be documented in the chain of custody, and you'd have to go back through, and that's transparent. You'd have to, that should never happen because it's a sealed ballot box, and there are procedures to check to make sure it's empty every morning and all that. But again, there would be a record of that.
Yeah.
And,
but what you just said, in the morning they check it to make sure it's
correct.
empty. Okay,
Correct.
that's all I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Let me just close by saying that look, I understand that this is a lot of change, and I understand that there's a lot of concern about election security and election integrity. We share that. That was the impetus for this project from the beginning. We didn't do this in a vacuum. We had stakeholders from all over LA County, and we interviewed and talked with over 3,000 poll workers, voters, non-voters, low propensity voters. We did this in a very engaged manner, and we did have, and still do have, security experts, accessibility experts, and usability experts that have weighed in. Not everybody's going to agree on every point. I think this is a vast improvement to what we've had before. I think that we know that the biggest threat, at least from my perspective, the biggest threat in this election right now are misinformation campaigns, where people are given information that for those of us who are close to it sounds silly, but even social media posts that say, you know, some people get to vote on Wednesdays and some people get to vote on Tuesdays. Those things are the things that affect election integrity, and they're low cost and they're really hard to combat. So in addition to all of this, we're also trying to work with the social media companies in our media campaign to also establish what are the trusted sources of information about elections information. We want people to show up and vote in LA County, and that's really the goal behind all of this. So I know it can get heated, and I know and you know, good dialogue back and forth is important. But this is going forward for March election, and the more that we can come together as a community and encourage everybody to participate and vote, the better off for all of us. So I appreciate you coming out and being willing to have a dialogue with us.
Coming out, making the trip, and now there's Laura, our dear Laura Herrera, has the machines over there for you. Do you want to say anything, Laura? Do you want to?